Cobweb is a 2023 American horror thriller directed by Samuel Bodine in his directorial debut. The film stars Lizzie Kaplan, Woody Norman, Cleopatra Coleman, and Anthony Starr.
Happening, folks, and welcome to the channel. Pay no attention to my pajamas. I just figured my bedroom would be the perfect backdrop to review this movie. Besides, you guys are like family. Well, most of you are. Some people thought Cobweb was terrifying and absolutely terrific, while other people thought it was just atmosphere without any substance. Let's take a closer look at Cobweb's plot, and we can decide whether or not the DVD should go straight into a box up in your attic where it'll collect cobwebs.
The movie opens at 2 in the morning, and our main character, Peter, played by Woody Norman, thinks he's hearing things inside the walls of his bedroom. So he knocks on the wall, and something knocks back. So he gets Mom and Dad, but of course Mom and Dad don't hear anything themselves, so he's told everything he's hearing is all up in his head.
Because all great parents know attributing scary things to a frightened young boy's own brain is a great way to comfort him and get him to go right back to sleep.
Not surprisingly, Peter's also being bullied at school, but kinda surprisingly, he's being bullied by every single person, except his new substitute teacher, Miss Divine, played by Australia's own Cleopatra Coleman, who you may have seen earlier this year in Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. Being a perceptive teacher, Miss Divine recognizes Peter doesn't possess the same confidence the other kids do, so she takes him under her wing immediately. Later that night, while I'm eating dinner with Lizzie Kaplan, who was by far the best thing about Cloverfield, I tell her what I really think.
When you and your 5'8" Hollywood husband get your Hollywood divorce, text me.
And meanwhile, in the real movie, and not my daydreams anymore, Peter asks his parents why they don't let him trick or treat like all the other kids. So his dad tells him a story about an old house down the street with boarded up windows. And apparently, a little girl that lived there vanished a few years back while she was going door to door. Mom tells Peter it was a very traumatic event. He's not allowed to celebrate Halloween because she doesn't want to have to think about it.
Child psychology tells us, although Carol's attitude is a very common one, it's also very selfish. Young children pick up on absolutely everything, and by avoiding something you don't want to deal with, you're teaching. I'm just going to avoid dealing with that for right now because I'm making a video.
That night, with his flashlight trained on the parachute wallpaper, things go bump in the night. And then the thing that went bump in the night says his name. So he screams, obviously, and Father of the Year comes in to tell him it's rats. So the next morning, they leave poison all around the place, and although Peter loves its cinnamon scent, he's against the idea of killing little animals, which is lovely. The following day in school, Peter paints a pack of pickled... Peter paints a picture that gets Miss Divine all worried, so she swings around the house after class to check in on him. And of course, Mom dismisses her, and then she gets torn into Peter for asking strangers for help. So he pretends it was just a scary Halloween picture. That night, the voice in the wall starts a conversation, and the pair end up getting along like peas and carrots. That makes Peter happy. The next day in school, when Miss Divine tells him she likes his pumpkin better than everyone else's, he gets even happier. Until, that is, one of Peter's bullies smushes his happiness right into the asphalt. That night, when he's crying himself to sleep on his huge pillow, the voice in the wall encourages him to fight back the next time, which he does the following day by kicking the bully down a flight of concrete stairs. Go Peter! That gets him expelled from school. As expected, his loving parents make him feel even worse about it than he already did. When Dad asks him what the drawing was really about, Peter tells him he really did hear a voice behind the wall. So Dad screams at him and locks him in the basement in the dark without food or water. And if that feels a bit off to you, don't worry about it. They tell him they're doing it because they love him. And after he's been locked down there a while, he finds a pit with a metal cage door over it. Back in school, Miss Divine gets a dressing down for going to a student's house. The principal says he understands, but he warns her against getting too attached. And then he tells her the story of the missing little girl to explain away their overprotectiveness. This gets Miss Divine scouring the internet for information, and apparently the 11-year-old girl was named Rebecca, and she was dressed like Princess Leia, so I like her already. Plus, of course, she was the Princess Leia who flies through space.
Because nobody likes that one.
Miss Devine can't shake the feeling something's up at Peter's house, so she brings his last math test around as an excuse to visit. Dad invites her in, and he's wielding a hammer and his forearm's torn open and bleeding. He says it's from home renovations, but it's obvious that's not true, even if the story never tells us what actually caused it. Things are very tense, and they tell Miss Devine Peter's in his bedroom and that Carol's going to be homeschooling him from here on in. When she asks if she can see Peter, Mom goes bonkers at the implication her son might be in some kind of danger within his own home. But then Peter hears his teacher upstairs in the kitchen, so he starts kicking the door. But the washing machine drowns him out, because for some reason it sounds like Dad's emptied his entire toolbox into it. Sometime later, Mom bakes pumpkin cupcakes to celebrate Peter getting out of the basement. And isn't that lovely? And he's bruised and dirty and spaced out, so they give him a bath and tell him he'll be learning from home from here on in. As soon as he gets back into his room, he tapas his way back into a chat with his new wall amigo, and she immediately tells him she's worried because his parents aren't who they're pretending to be, and that makes Peter want to meet the voice. Only she says she's been trapped in there so long she's too scary to look at now, but Peter insists he doesn't care. So she directs him to a hole in the wall behind his wallpaper, and she proves she's real. Then she tells him she's his big sister, and she says this whole time she's been waiting for him to grow big enough to help her escape. And then she tells him their parents are going to do the same thing to him. They put her in the wall because they hated her, and soon they'll kill her and put him in the wall because they're evil. When Peter says he doesn't believe her, she offers him proof by telling him to go dig in the pumpkin patch that is their garden. So he does, and he finds a tiny little skull. And when Mom busts him, he says he's thinking he could carve a pumpkin, seeing as he's not allowed to dress up like everybody else. And for reasons I'm not really sure of, that makes Lizzie Kaplan really angry. Peter gets scared, obviously, so he calls Miss Devine's number from the top of his math test, and right as he's getting the words, "I need your help," out, Mom busts him a second time. When the teacher calls back, Mom picks up and dismisses her yet again. And then she throws Peter into his room where she discovers the hole in the wall, and that gets her acting bonkers. Then she tells him to wait until his father gets home and says whatever happens next is entirely his own fault. So his sister tells him he has to do something immediately because they're gonna kill both of them. And then Dad comes in and tells him they're gonna have to sort out a problem in the garden together. The next day, Dad tells Peter the pumpkins are all rotting and they need to bury them immediately. When Peter goes outside, there's a huge hole where the skeleton was. Meanwhile, the kid Peter kicked down the stairs swings by the house with a few older boys to case the joint. And then back at dinner on Halloween night, the family's eating pumpkin soup as they often do, except Dad notices something's a bit different about it. By the time they recognize the distinct cinnamon taste, it's too late for them to do anything about the rat poison Peter's snuck into their dinner. When Peter tells him he knows they hurt his sister, everything goes upside down. Mom calls 911 and Dad convulses all around the kitchen until the poison's run its course. With Dad gone, Mom has a go at Peter, and that forces him to chuck another person down the stairs. And Mom's last words are, but of course he does. And of course, she's not what she said she was. At the same time, the boys arrive outside pretending to be trick-or-treaters, and when the door swings wide open for them, they just go right in. They find the remnants of something nasty, but both parents' bodies have been moved. And as they're smashing the place up, we catch our first glimpse of the girl in the wall. And at first glance, she's very reminiscent of Guillermo del Toro's mama character. Each of the intruding boys are picked off methodically by the impossibly strong, gravity-defying, super-fast sister. When she's finished them all off, she plops herself down on Peter's bed and tells him she was so hideous at birth, their parents made the pit in the basement and stuck her in it. Then she locks him up where she was locked up just as Miss Devine's arriving. When she sees the initial carnage and chaos, she assumes Peter's been done in. That is, until she sees all the other carnage and chaos. And then Sister Sarah starts doing that overdone spider walk thing that would normally put me off a movie and sometimes scare my buddy Heidi. But they don't overdo it, so I'm still here. And apparently Heidi isn't scared. And then she hears Peter screaming from upstairs, so she goes right back up in there instead of going outside to phone the police. The back and forth continues until Peter's trapped in her pit and Miss Devine tries rescuing him. Peter Rapunzels the shit out of her hair while Miss Devine beats her with a stick. And after they get the trap door closed, the movie ends with the sister telling him he'll always feel her and hear her in the house for the rest of his life. And if I was Peter, I'd have been all like,
I just poisoned both of our parents to death, and I don't have a job to cover the mortgage because I'm 7, so I don't really think I'll be staying here, but you have at it, sis. And there you have it, folks, the plot to Cobweb. Would you kindly excuse me for a moment? That'll be my sister, Bernadette. Unfortunately, she was born without a sense of comedic timing, so my parents built her into the walls. Things were different in the 80s. Here's the good bits.
I find myself saying this more and more in the last couple of years. This movie was technically proficient. Cinematographer Philip Lazaro has worked the camera on a number of big-name movies, and that comes across when you're watching Cobweb. The actors did what they were directed to do. Anthony Starr was believable as an aggressive father with a secret. Lizzie Kaplan obviously had some fun playing the unstable mother, and I had no issues with her performance, even though she still hasn't texted me. And Woody Norman drew as much of my sympathy as the story would have wanted from me. Visually and atmospherically, this movie was on point, and the soundtrack did what soundtracks do, and at the end of the runtime, this was a movie. Having said that,
look at her go. She's so excited, and I have no idea how I'm going to get her back into the wall. But that's not your problem. Here's the shite bits.
For a movie basically set up to succeed with the things going bump in the night premise, it managed to fail pretty hard. It's a Halloween movie that never capitalized on the pre-packaged atmosphere all Halloween movies inherently bring with them. The writing was also questionable at points. Were we really meant to believe every single person at his school hated him except the substitute teacher? Peter was polite and articulate, and he kept to himself, and look at those big brown lovely peepers. And another thing, rat poison contains something called denatonium benzoate, which has an intensely bitter taste, and it's been added specifically to prevent accidental ingestion by human beings. Neither of them would have got past the first spoonful, never mind to the bottom of their bowls. The story also left a lot of questions unanswered, like what happened to Mark's arm, or what were they planning on doing with the sister? How did she become so seemingly educated and articulate from the bottom of a 30-foot pit? By all accounts, she should have been feral and incapable of most forms of social interaction. And why would them killing a trick-or-treater prevent Peter from going out at Halloween if he had no idea they'd done it or that he had a sister? They let him go to school, and the biggest quandary, for me anyways, if they knew they were harboring somebody somewhere in their house, why did they not sort it immediately the first time Peter complained about the noises? I do like the fact they held back on showing Sister Sarah until the final moments of the movie, and I think a lot of directors can learn from this choice. But to me, the final reveal instantly deflated any of the tension they'd managed to build up by turning the monster into an unbelievable CGI cartoon that totally contrasted the tone of the first hour of runtime. Climbing out of that pit would have been impossible, and her speed and agility would have been impossible. And defying gravity, well, this isn't to say great horror movies can't have impossible elements. I am saying they need to be believable within the greater context of the story. 2022's Barbarian, another monster in the basement film produced by the same people, might I add, had a shockingly similar premise and just as many fantastical elements, but it somehow managed to pull them off far more efficiently, and while it wasn't without its faults, Barbarian demonstrated you can have impossible things in a film if you weave them into the narrative properly.
Cobweb's big reveal was as scary as Tony the Tiger jumping out in front of you suddenly, or my sister, for that matter.
So, should you watch Cobweb if you haven't seen it already? Or should you toss the DVD into a pit and never look at it again until it grows really long hair and learns to defy physics and comes back to kill you?
Why not? It's harmless, it'll pass 88 minutes of your time if you're bored, and it's streaming now, so it won't cost you $375 for a night out. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, hit the like button, consider subscribing, it would really help the channel out. And until next time, folks.